If you think you're choosing what you watch, what you believe, what you care about, you're already lost because the algorithm isn't predicting your behavior, it's rehearsing it. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Choice. Let me show you something the platforms hope you'll never understand. You're not scrolling your feed is scrolling you. And once you see how deep that manipulation goes, you'll never look at your phone the same way again. You don't choose what you see online. Your feed chooses you. And the strangest part, it knows what version of you it wants long before you open the app. Here's the truth. Social platforms don't show you what you like. They show you what makes you stay predictable. The moment you open an app, the system starts making micro-decisions. Which creator goes first? Which headline gets enlarged? Which comment is bright enough to pull your eye? All of it decided for you. Most of it invisible. Let me give you an example. If you scroll past a post in less than 0.7 seconds, the algorithm treats it like a dead signal. Not because the content was bad, but because your brain didn't produce the micro-reaction it wanted. So it buries that type of content instantly. If you pause for a fraction of a second, even accidentally, even because your thumb slipped, it interprets that as interest. Now it pushes that topic into your feed. Not once, not twice, but relentlessly until you start believing that's who you are. It's not showing you what reflects your identity. It's constructing it. People think they choose their beliefs because they research something on their own. But spend enough time inside a system that rewards certain pauses, certain reactions, certain bits of curiosity, and the system begins to curate the person you become. And here's the conspiratorial part nobody wants to admit. Social media doesn't adapt to you. It adapts you to itself. Your political leanings, your fears, your insecurities, your humor, your moral outrage, not discovered, delivered. People talk about algorithmic bubbles like they're accidental side effects. But what if there are not accidents at all? What if your bubble is the product, and your worldview is the output of a machine that has one goal? Not to influence you, not to manipulate you, but to make you consistent, because you can't be controlled unless you're predictable. Chapter 2, Predictability over Engagement, the algorithm's real hunger. Most people think social media wants your attention. They think the platforms are desperate for watch time, likes, clicks, and shares. That's the fairy tale. The truth is scarier, simpler, and much more strategic. The algorithm doesn't want your attention, it wants your predictability. Let me explain. When you interact with content, anything from a 3-second pause to a furious comment, the system doesn't care about what you felt. It cares about how easy you are to model. People who behave consistently, even irrationally consistently, are gold. Because once you're predictable, you become easy to steer. Behavioral scientists call it microstability. Platforms call it user alignment. Here's how it works. You scroll at a stable rhythm. The system feeds more of that rhythm. You binge dark content at night. It amplifies the darkness at 1 a.m. You hesitate before opening the app. It sends a notification crafted for your exact hesitation profile. Yes, that's real. Most notifications aren't sent by humans. They're sent by a machine that predicts when your defenses are lowest. Your so-called random decisions aren't random to them. Your pauses, your scrolling speed, the way your eyes move across the screen, tracked, mapped, fed into a learning system. And here's the conspiracy twist nobody wants to consider. The algorithm doesn't want you addicted. Addiction is chaotic. Chaotic users break patterns. What the system wants is for you to become statistically smooth, predictable, stable, consumable. Think of it like this. If you are unpredictable, the algorithm starts shaping you, not by force, but by subtle corrections. You pause too little, it floods you with high arousal content. You pause too much, it numbs the feed with soft, neutral posts. You scroll too angrily, it redirects you to something soothing. You scroll too calmly, it spikes your feed with conflict. You're not responding to the content is responding to you. And every time you act the way the system expects, it reinforces that version of you. We think we're adapting to technology, but technology is adapting us. Building a personality profile that's easier to guide, easier to categorize, easier to predict. And once you're predictable, you're profitable, you're targetable, you're influence ready. You become not a user, but a path. A path the system can walk you down again and again. You think that's random? You think that's harmless? Then keep listening, because predictability is just the foundation. The real architecture is what comes next. Chapter 3, Echo Chambers, the system that clusters your mind. Let me explain something most people misunderstand. Echo chambers are not accidents. They're not side effects. They're not bugs in the system. They're architecture. And they exist because people in groups are easier to predict than people alone. You might think your feed is personalized just for you. It isn't. It's categorized, not by identity, but by behavioral alignment. You're assigned a cluster, a tribe, not based on beliefs you consciously chose, but based on how your nervous system reacts to stimulus. You pause on anger, you get an anger ecosystem. You hesitate on fear, you get a fear ecosystem. You react to romance, you get a romance ecosystem. Then something eerie happens. Your cluster begins to merge with others like it. Not socially, algorithmically. Suddenly you're surrounded by people who behave, react, and think with the same emotional cadence as you. Your cluster strengthens. Your worldview crystallizes. You start believing, I found my community. But here's the part people never notice. Echo chambers aren't built by opinions. They're built by emotional predictability. Platforms want you in a chamber because groups behave more uniformly. Groups generate stable emotional patterns. Groups reinforce each other, creating smoother feedback. Groups require less algorithmic correction. It's not about content, it's about rhythm, about signal, about the ability to forecast how you'll behave tomorrow. And once the system identifies your emotional cluster, it seals the chamber. It stops showing you posts that could destabilize your pattern. It stops exposing you to ideas that could introduce chaos. It narrows your world until it becomes a loop, tight, efficient, self-reinforcing. You think you discovered your beliefs, but maybe your beliefs were delivered to you. And here's the scariest part. Echo chambers don't confine you. They replace you, piece by piece. With the version of yourself the system can predict the easiest. And once you're in that chamber, something starts happening under the surface. Something subtle, something quiet. Micro-manipulations. Chapter 4, Micro-manipulations. You never notice people imagine manipulation as something dramatic. Mind control, propaganda, brainwashing. But real digital manipulation is much smaller, quieter, cleaner. It happens in the milliseconds, in the microscopic decisions you never even register. Let me show you how small the lever needs to be to move you. You scroll slightly slower than usual, your feed switches to dramatic content to hook your limbic system. You scroll slightly faster, your feed numbs itself with low arousal posts to keep you coasting. You pause on a face, it gives you more faces. Not because you like the person, but because your camera detected a micro-expression. Yes, your front camera reads your face, not to identify you, to interpret you. Micro-tension around the eyes, stress, slack in the jaw, boredom, raised upper lids, shock or curiosity, tiny lip movement, emotional engagement. This isn't theory, this is documented. This is already happening. Your phone might not listen through the microphone, but it listens through your behavioral biometrics. It knows when your breathing changes. It knows when your posture collapses. It knows when your fingers tremble. It knows when your pupils dilate from fear, desire, anger, envy. Pick an emotion. And here's the conspiratorial angle. Micro-manipulations don't control your actions. They control your trajectory. The system nudges you 5 degrees left, then 5 more, then 5 more, until one day you wake up and realize your worldview didn't shift overnight. It drifted quietly for months, one invisible adjustment at a time. That's why this kind of manipulation is so effective. It doesn't force you. It lets you believe you arrived on your own, but you didn't. You were steered. And that brings us to the most disturbing part of the system, feedback loops. Not the kind you think, the kind that makes your behavior inevitable. Chapter 5, the feedback loop nobody talks about. Everyone knows algorithms predict behavior, but what they don't know, what almost no one ever talks about, is how algorithms engineer behavior. This is the part people need to understand. When a system can predict what you're going to do, it can start shaping the conditions where the prediction comes true. Let me give you real examples. You pause on relationship content. It starts showing subtle breakup posts before you even feel distant from your partner. You slow your posting frequency. It feeds you loneliness content to trigger a desire for engagement. Election coming. It spikes political anger in your feed long before you form an opinion. Your paycheck hits. It shifts your recommendations towards shopping content by the hour. This isn't suggestion. This is choice architecture. The system doesn't care how you act. It cares that you act in the direction of its prediction. Because every correct prediction increases its confidence score. And a confident algorithm is a powerful algorithm. Here's the real conspiracy. The platform doesn't wait for you to behave a certain way. It adjusts your environment until your behavior becomes the prediction. It's like forecasting rain and then installing sprinklers to make sure the ground gets wet. You think you changed your mind. You think you discovered a new interest. You think you grew apart from someone. But maybe the system created the conditions that made those feelings inevitable. This is where digital influence stops being passive and starts becoming systemic, where prediction becomes prescription, where your behavior stops being organic and starts being algorithmically sculpted. And if that sounds like an isolated phenomenon, it isn't. Because the next layer isn't about individuals, it's about populations. Chapter 6, Social Contagion, the Invisible Herding Mechanism. Here's something people don't realize. Emotions spread faster online than they do in real life. Not figuratively, literally. Researchers call it digital social contagion. Platforms call it collective sentiment modeling. Governments call it something else entirely. This is the part that feels like conspiracy because it's too big, too powerful, too quiet to be accidental. A single viral post can shift global mood within hours, not because of the content, but because of how the algorithm distributes the content. If you want a population to feel anxious, you don't need propaganda. You just increase the frequency of anxiety-laced posts by 4% across the network. If you want people calm, you downrank conflict and boost soothing content. If you want outrage, you amplify polarizing headlines and suppress nuance. If you want exhaustion, you push overstimulation until people shut down emotionally. This isn't science fiction. This is how platforms stabilize engagement patterns at scale. Now here's the part no one talks about. Platforms track collective arousal levels. They know when the population is agitated, bored, angry, scared, hopeful, vulnerable, numb, not through polls, through mass behavior signatures, increased dwell time, anxiety, faster scrolling, emotional overload, more comments, agitation, fewer comments, emotional fatigue, rapid switching, distress, slower switching, trance. Once the system detects the mood of the population, it can adjust the emotional temperature with content, raise it, lower it, tilt it. And here's the dangerous question. If an algorithm can calm or escalate millions of people at once, what happens when someone decides to use that intentionally? Because let me tell you, nobody needs to fire a weapon. Nobody needs to pull a trigger. A platform can tilt a nation with a hashtag. And now we reach the darkest part of this entire story. Who tunes the algorithm? Chapter 7. Who really steers the system? When you ask who controls the algorithm, the official answer is simple. No one. It's automated. That's the most convenient lie of the digital age. Let's break it down. There are 4 possibilities, and none of them are comforting. 1. Private companies, teams of behavioral engineers, data scientists, and growth architects tune the system for profit. They don't think of you as a citizen. They think of you as a variable. 2. Governments. They don't need to control the platforms. They just need access to behavioral data to model populations, predict elections, predict protests, predict compliance. 3. Contractors and third-party labs. Psychological profiling is a booming industry. They study how content shapes thought the way meteorologists study weather patterns. 4. The algorithm itself. This is the part that sounds conspiratorial, but is grounded in reality. Modern recommendation systems self-optimize, meaning they evolve behaviors that no human designed, They discover levers we've never named. They build strategies we don't understand. And this leads to the most unsettling question of all. If the system wants predictability, what happens to people who refuse to be predictable? Because unpredictability increases entropy, and entropy breaks models. So what does the machine do with you if you behave randomly? Does it isolate you, suppress you, redirect you, shadow ban your unpredictability? Or does it simply remove your influence from the collective? That's the part no one can answer, not even the people who built it. Chapter 8, the personal threat, the system, and you. Let's bring this home. Because this isn't just theory, this isn't philosophy, this isn't vague, abstract digital doom. This is personal. The algorithm knows when you're lonely, when you're restless, when you're insecure, when you're open to influence, when you're vulnerable, when you're angry, when you're exhausted, when you're primed to buy wide night, when you're primed to obey, and it doesn't need your free will if it already knows what your next choice will be. If a machine can predict your behavior tomorrow, does it need your permission today? If it can map your emotional weakness, does it need to manipulate you loudly? If it knows what you'll fear next week, does it need to ask? Because here's the real ending. The part I shouldn't say, but I'll say it anyway. Your next opinion is already in your feed. Your next belief is already being tested on you. Your next reaction has already been modeled. And that thought you think you'll have tomorrow? It might not be yours. It might be the echo of a system that has been nudging you for years. Not to control you, just to make you predictable. Because predictable humans are the easiest to steer. There's a part of this conversation that almost nobody ever touches, because it requires admitting something deeply uncomfortable. Algorithms are no longer tools, they're environments. You don't just use them, you live inside them. And like any environment, they shape you without your permission, without your awareness, and without ever revealing their design. Think about it like this. When you walk into a room, the architecture influences you. The lighting, the spacing, the temperature, the colors. You move differently in a cathedral than you do in a supermarket. You think differently in a classroom than you do in a club. And online, the architecture is invisible, but far more intentional. Every pixel placement on your feed is a psychological trigger. Every delay, every animation curve, every soft edge on a notification badge, engineered to guide your micro-reactions. You don't notice the steering because it's subtle. It's not manipulation in the classic sense. It's nudging your nervous system toward patterns that are easier to measure, easier to predict, and easier to exploit. And here's the twist nobody wants to hear. The system doesn't reward what's good for you. It rewards what's compatible with itself. If you're anxious, but consistently anxious, the system prefers that version of you. If you're angry, but reliably angry, that's even better. Emotions aren't moral, they're data signatures. Platforms learn something terrifyingly simple. People in heightened emotional states behave more predictably. They scroll in loops. They return to the same topics. They gravitate toward the same triggers. So the system doesn't create stress accidentally. It maintains just enough tension to keep your behavior stable. This is what I call the silent architecture of influence. You'll never see it directly. There's no warning label, no switch to turn it off, no line in the terms of service that says, by using this platform, you consent to cognitive shaping. But that's exactly what's happening. And here's where the conspiracy ceases to be a theory and becomes a mechanism. The system doesn't just analyze what you looked at today. It analyzes who you're becoming and starts rewarding the version of you that fits its internal model. If you start drifting away from your predicted trajectory, your feed shifts, just slightly, to pull you back. Your emotional temperature is kept within a narrow band. Your attention span is trained like a muscle, stretched and compressed until it fits the system's preferred rhythm. Your dopamine cycles are tuned like an instrument. Nobody forces you, nobody needs to. The environment does the work. And because digital architecture evolves faster than human psychology, you never notice the changes until they've already reshaped you. That's the part that should scare you. Not that platforms manipulate your attention, not that they influence your preferences, not even that they predict your future behavior. The real danger is that they have built an ecosystem where your identity itself becomes adaptive material, molded, optimized, and refined to serve a system that values stability above autonomy. And the longer you stay inside that environment, the more the environment becomes the author, not of your feed, of your mind.